Today we're going to talk about section 1.3, which is linear functions and models. So today our goal is to learn what a linear function is, how linear functions are useful, what's the slope of a line, what is the y-intercept, and to also learn applications of linear models. All right, so let's start out with the definition. A linear function is one that can be written in the form f of x equals mx plus b, or y is equal to mx plus b. Okay? Here, m and b are fixed numbers. Another definition, the y-intercept is the point where the line crosses the vertical y-axis. It's where the line crosses the vertical y-axis. So here you have your coordinate plane. If I draw this line like so, this point here is your y-intercept. That's your y-intercept. Okay, it's where the graph or the line crosses the y-axis. Okay, so one thing you need to know, be able to do the following: how to compute the y-intercept given your slope and a point. The line passes through this point that you're given, so y1 would be equal to m times x1 plus b, and then b equals y1 minus m times x1. This point B, is your y-intercept. Now, in high school, you may have learned other ways to find your y-intercept. I'm okay with that. You use whichever way you're comfortable with. This is just one way your book describes that you can find it. Okay? What questions do you have? Remember, you have to talk. What questions do you have? None? Okay. Next, how to compute the y-intercept given y equals mx plus b. You set x equal to 0, and then you solve for y. This will be your y-intercept. Do you need me to zoom in on the screen, or is this okay? Okay. So, again, to compute the y-intercept given the equation of a line as so, y equals mx plus b, you set x equal to 0, so plug 0 in, and you solve for y. Your resulting answer will be your y-intercept. So let's compute the y-intercept given the following. Given y equals 4x minus 2, if we use the method described in the box above, we need to let what be 0? X, good, so let x equal 0. And then that means y is equal to what? Negative 2, good. So your y-intercept would be 0, negative 2. Notice your y-intercept is going to cross the y-axis, so x is always going to be 0. Okay? Now, find the y-intercept given this point and the slope, m equals 2. What are you getting for the y-intercept here? Go ahead. Negative 1. Is it just negative 1 by itself? What is your x value? What would x be at negative 1? Say it loud. 0. Good. 0. So 0, negative 1. Very good. So to write this out, b would be equal to 5 minus 2 times 3, or in other words, 5 minus 6, which is negative 1. Okay? Which is negative 1. What questions do you have? All right, good. So we have our y-intercept here. Now, let's talk about another concept that discusses the steepness of a line. What measures the steepness of the line and is usually denoted as m? The slope. Very good. So the first blank here for this definition, or there's only one blank in this definition, the slope of the line measures the steepness of the line, and it is usually denoted as m. Numerically, m is equal to y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1, which is also called your change in y over your change in x. And we denote this as delta y. Delta represents the change. So the change in y over the change in x. So here you would be given 2 points, x sub 1, y sub 1, and x sub 2, y sub 2, and the slope would be the change in y over the change in x. Be consistent with which y you put first and x you put first. Okay? All right, graphically, the slope is equal to rise over run. Graphically, the slope is equal to rise over run, meaning your numerator tells you how many to rise or to drop, and then your denominator tells you how many to go over, to the left or to the right. Okay? So, examples. This line has, is it a positive slope or a negative slope? Positive slope, right? It has a positive slope because it's increasing. So this line has a positive slope. What about this one on the right side? Negative slope, good. Okay. Now let's look at example 3. In example 3, we want to decide which of the two given functions is linear and find its equation. So here I've given you some x values and the corresponding f of x values and g of x values. Decide which of the two given functions represents a linear function and find its equation. Would you like a minute to try it? Yes? Okay. A hint, because some people said you were lost, right? So a hint here. I'm going to move this over, and then I'm going to write a hint. So a hint here is to look at the pairs of points here and here, and then also look at the pairs of points here and here. If you look at the x values, this pair of points, I'm going to use blue for the x values. What can you say about the blue? They go up by 3. Is the same step size the same for f of x? Yes or no? Do they increase by the same here? What's the change here? 4. What's the change here? 3. But then you look here, what's the change? What's the change here? Oh, so which one do you think is going to be the line? G of x, very good. Because you have x increases in steps of 3. So x increases in steps of 3 for the first and last pairs, but f of x does not increase in equal steps. G of x does increase in steps of 9 for the first and last pairs, right? So based on this information, you should now, so we've determined that G of x is going to be linear. So G of x, let me erase that. So G of x is linear. Now, using the information that you've learned about how to find the slope and how to find the intercept, the y-intercept, go ahead and find the equation now for g of x. Okay, you have enough information to find the equation for g of x. Okay, what's g of x? Very good. G of x is equal to 3x minus 1. Does anyone need to see the work in order to get there?
Yeah.
Okay, so remember your slope is your change in y over your change in x. So remember here, we circle the y's, and these are the x's, okay? So you would have your change in y would be, you found out, you can just use one of these points, or you can just use your change, right? You're going from -1 to 8. What was your change? 9, right? So that's your change in y would be 9. So that's equal to 9 over your change in x. And what was your change in x? 3, good. So you have, that's equal to 3. So that's your slope. And then b would then be equal to g of 0. What's g of 0? -1, good. From your table, you see that this is -1. So when x is 0, g of 0 is -1. So then you use your y equals mx plus b formula, or equation of a line, and then you have 3x minus 1. Does that make sense? Talk. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Online, does that make sense? So let's look at example 4. Example 4, we have to find the slope of the given line if it is defined. Find the slope of the given line if it is defined. For the first problem, or for the first part of this example, you have y is equal to -2x minus, or -2x minus 1 over 3. And then part B, you have 2x plus 3 equals 0. Would you like a couple minutes to try it first? Okay, go for it. Find the slope of the given line if it is defined. What can you do to find the slope for part A? I see people shaking their heads like I don't know. Well, when I give you time to work on something, if you don't know, it's your responsibility to ask me a question, okay? This is about communication. Go ahead.
You can break that fraction up into -2/3 x and
Say it again.
you can break that fraction up
As?
the same denominator into -2/3 x and then plus 1/3.
Very good. That's exactly what you do here. You distribute that negative, and that gives you -2x plus 1 divided by 3, and then you rewrite it to put it in the slope-intercept form. Good. And once you have it in this form, what can you tell me? The slope is -2/3. Good. The slope is -2/3. When I give you time to discuss something and to work on something, work on it and discuss it. And if you do not understand what's going on, let me know. I cannot read your mind, but I can help you get through a problem. I can help you learn a concept. Does that make sense? Okay, it requires communication. Remember, I told you I expect that of you and I want that from you. Okay? All right. 2x plus 3 equals 0. What should we do here? Okay, so you isolating the x, you get 2x equals -3, and then x is equal to -3 over 2. So, very good. Now, what can you say about this? The problem says find the slope of the given line if it is defined. What's the slope here?
No.
Say it again.
It's not defined.
It's not defined. Very good. The slope is undefined. Very good. What kind of line is this? Is it a wiggly line? Is it a vertical line, a horizontal line, diagonal line? What kind of line is it? Vertical, very good. This is a vertical line. This is a vertical line. And vertical lines like this, the slope is undefined. The slope is undefined because remember, for your slope, you have to have the change in y over the change in x. But for a vertical line, your x value is always the same, which means if you find your change in x, that would give you what? Okay, I'll say it one more time. So, for a vertical line, the slope is undefined. Why? Because remember that your slope has your change in y over your change in x, right? And for a vertical line, your change in x is always the same, which means or your x values are always the same, which means if you find your change in x, what would that give you? Say it again? No, but what would the change in x give you? 0. The change in x would give you 0. Can you divide by 0? No. This is why it's undefined. That's why it's undefined. That's why your slope is undefined. Okay? Very good. Now, graph the given equation, y minus 1/4 x equals -2. What's the first thing we should do for this problem? Go ahead. That's right. Put it in y equals mx plus b form. So, what should we do to both sides? Add 1/4 x. Great. So, this means y is equal to 1/4 x minus 2. Okay, so what's your slope here? Good. Your slope is 1/4. What's your y-intercept? Good. Your y-intercept is -2. Or, as an ordered pair, 0, -2. So then you plot 0, -2. How do you use your slope? Say it loud. Rise over run. Good. So that means we go up 1. And then we go to the right 4. So that would be a point there. And then the next point would go up 1 over 4. So now that would be at 8. Okay. Similarly, you can go down 1 and to the left 4. And then you sketch your line. So that would be the graph of y. What questions do you have? Okay. All right. So a few facts that you should know. Parallel lines have the same slope. Parallel lines have the same slope. The slope of what kind of line is undefined? Vertical, very good. We just discussed that. The slope of a vertical line is undefined. The slope of what kind of line is 0? Horizontal, very good. The slope of a horizontal line is 0 because your change in y, which is in your numerator of your slope, your y values would always be the same, so your change in y would be what? So remember, I see some of you looking, so that might indicate your visual. So remember, your slope is y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. In the case that you have a horizontal line, if you have a horizontal line like so, then that means your y values here are always the same. So what would that mean about your numerator? What would you get? 0. Very good. You would get 0, which means you have 0 over some number, which is why your slope would be 0. Okay? So for example, to put a couple of pictures with the idea. So suppose we graph this line here. That's the point 3, 2. And here would be the point 3, -4. Note that this is the line of x, the line x equals 3. Your slope here, m, would be -4 minus 2 over 3 minus 3. What's 3 minus 3? 0. We cannot define by 0, which means it's undefined. Does that make sense? Okay, so now y equals 5. If this is the point -3, 5, and this is the point 2, 5, then your slope is what minus what?
5 minus 5.
Good. 5 minus 5 over what?
2 plus 3.
2 plus 3. Good. And what does that give you? 5, you said?
Oh, 0.
0, 0. It gives you 0 over 5, which is 0. Okay? So that's why your slope is 0 for a horizontal line. Okay? What questions do you have? Okay.
Wait,
Yes?
no,
Go ahead, ask your question.
I thought the 2 was a 3.
Can you just stay on that for a second? please?
Yes, we can stay on this page for a second. So for example 6, I want you to find equations for the following straight lines. They are straight lines. In part A, find the equation for the straight line through the point 1, -4 and -1, 1. I do want your final answer for each one to be in the form y equals mx plus b. Okay? Would you like a couple minutes to try it? How would you approach part A? What's the approach? I gave you 2 points, so you have to find the slope, and after you find the slope, you should find your y-intercept and then put it in the form. There you go. Good. Go for it. All right, let's go through A. Let's do it. So, what did you get for your final answer? For A, what did you get? -3 over 2x minus what? Leave it as a fraction. Minus 5 halves. Good. Good. So now let's write out the mathematical justification for it. So you find your slope. So that means m is equal to -1 minus a -4 over -1 minus 1. That's equal to -1 plus 4 divided by -2, or in other words, 3 over -2. Okay? Then for your intercept, b, now we're using the formula from the bottom of page 1 of your notes. So b is equal to y sub 1 minus m times x sub 1. That's an x there. So that's equal to, in our case, -4 minus -3 halves times 1. That's equal to -4 plus 3 halves, or that's equal to -8 over 2 plus 3 halves. -8 plus 3 is 5, so that gives us 5 over 2. So that's our b. So we get y is equal to -3 halves x minus 5 halves. Make sure you're working on math in this class. What questions do you have? Okay. Part B. Part B, find the equation for the line going through 1/3 -1 and is parallel to the line 3x minus 4y equals 8. What did you get for this one? Talk loud.
I changed my mind.
You changed your mind?
Yeah.
Okay. Any other takers? Go ahead.
Simplify the equation, please.
Yes. Did you want to just tell your final answer? Oh, you want to go ahead. You can take me through the steps. So simplify the equation. What do you do?
Put e equal to y.
Okay. So isolate y. Go ahead.
We have y equals 3/4x minus 4.
3 over 4x minus 4, you said? Does everyone agree?
Or minus 2, I'm sorry.
Minus 2.
Originally, and then you, if that slope.
Hold on one second. Does everybody agree with getting this or how to get this?
Yes.
Does anyone need to see how to get this? Yes? Okay, so let me erase this. And we'll take the steps to get there. So you have negative 4y is equal to negative 3x plus 8. And you weren't the only one who want to see it because there are many people writing. So now divide both sides by negative 4. So that means that y is equal to negative 3x over negative 4 plus 8 over negative 4. Or in other words, 3/4 x minus 2. Does that make sense? Okay, so now we have 3/4 x minus 2, and you were saying from there you can identify your what?
You can identify the slope,
Good, and what's your slope?
3/4.
3/4. Your slope is 3/4, and you want your line to be parallel, which means your slope should be what?
3/4.
3/4, because parallel lines have the same slope, right? Very good. And now from this point, what do you do?
You plug in the information, solve for b.
So you find b the same way you did in A?
Yes.
Okay, good. So you'll have b is equal to negative 1, because that's your y1, minus your slope, which is 3/4, times your x value, which is what? 1/3. Notice that your 3's cancel out there. And so you have, that's equal to negative 1 minus 1/4. Negative 1 minus 1/4 is the same thing as negative 4 over 4 minus 1 over 4. That gives us what? Negative 5/4. Good. So that means when we put everything together, y is going to be what? Minus 5/4. Very good. So this is the equation of the line through the point 1/3 negative 1, and it's parallel to the line 3x minus 4y equals 8. Very good. Very good. What questions do you have? Okay. Now, part C. We want the equation for the horizontal line that goes through the point 1, negative 4. What's the equation? Yes, go ahead.
So I plugged it in, I like plugged the points into y equals minus 50 and simplified. It was horizontal, like you know the slope's gonna be 0. So I made the m 0. So I did negative 4 equals 0 multiplied by 1 plus b.
Yeah, and what did you get?
B, or b would equal negative 4.
What equals negative 4?
Or y equals.
Very good. Y equals negative 4. Very good. Remember, your horizontal lines always have the form y equals a number, right? Y has to be equal to the y value from your pair, your number that's given to you, your ordered pair that's given to you. Okay? Very good. For part D, you want the equation of the vertical line that goes through the point 1, negative 4. What would that be? X equals 1. Very good. X equals 1.
And just to clarify, if we
Which
No.
one? The X?
The horizontal, the parallel line to the x-axis at -4. and
Like
then
that?
The opposite, vertical line parallel to the y-axis.
Going through?
Yes.
Going through what?
Yeah, just one. So-
One. Like that. You got it. Good. What other questions do you have? Okay. So now what we want to do is talk about position or displacement. The position or displacement is a number S given by your location as a function of time. Okay? The position or displacement is a number S given by your location as a function of time. So let's look at example 7. A police car was traveling down Ocean Parkway in a high-speed chase from Jones Beach. The car that was being pursued by the police was at Jones Beach at exactly 9:54 p.m., which means its T equals 9.9. And it passed Oak Beach, 13 miles from Jones Beach, at exactly 10:06 p.m. Pause this. Okay? So, at exactly 10:06 p.m., where it was overtaken by the police. Note that 6 minutes here in this problem is equivalent to 0.1 hours. Okay? So the 54, that's why you get 0.9 here. Okay? So, knowing that, we need to find out how fast was the car traveling. Okay? So in other words, we're asked to find our what? We're asked to find our slope. Very good. We're asked to find our slope. Okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to take S to be displacement from Jones Beach and T to be the time in hours. So we are given 2 points. We are given 2 points. Okay? Those 2 points are given in the form of T, S. The first point is 9.9. T is 9.9. And your position is 0 at that point, right? Because it says at exactly 9:54 p.m., that's the car that was being pursued by the police was at Jones Beach. So whenever it's 9.9, we get 0, okay? S, remember, is the displacement from Jones Beach, okay? And what is your other point that's given to you? Can't hear you? You have to make sure that it's in the form of T, S. What's T? The time. So what is the time for the next point? 10.1. Good. So your time is 10.1. And what is your position at 10.1? Remember, what is it? Remember, it's the displacement from Jones Beach. 13. Good. That's 13. That's 13. Right? Because it says that here is 13 miles from Jones Beach at exactly 10:06 p.m. And because 6 minutes is 0.1 hours, that's where the 10.1 comes from. And then 13 is the 13 miles from Jones Beach. That's your displacement from Jones Beach. Does that make sense? Okay. So, in order to find the slope, M, is equal to S sub 2 minus S sub 1 over T sub 2 minus T sub 1, or 13 minus 0 over 10.1 minus 9.9. And what do you get here? 13 over 0.2, which is what? Feel free to use your calculators if you want. Go ahead. 65 what? Miles per hour. Good. Very good. That's not that fast. That's not that fast at all. Okay? But that's right. Okay? Part B. Part B, how far was the car from Jones Beach at time T? How far was the car from Jones Beach at time T? So this part of the problem is really asking you to find an equation, right? It's asking you to find an equation in slope-intercept form. How would you do that?
You need to plug one of the coordinates, or like x and y values, into the y equals mx plus b form, and then use your slope you just found.
You got that absolutely correct. So what you need to do is take one of the points that we found, this one or this one, and then you also need to take into consideration that your slope is 65, and you can use that in the slope-intercept form, or you can use that in the form that's already manipulated on page 1. Either one will give you the same exact thing, okay? So here we know our slope. Did you want a minute to try it?
Yeah.
I'll give. Our slope is 65. Good. Which point did you choose to use? 0 and 13? No. 9.9 and 0, or either 10.1 and 13. Okay? I would choose the one that has 0 in it. It makes your algebra easier, but you can choose whichever one you want. You'll get the same thing. So you have B would then be equal to 0 minus 65 times 9.9, and that's equal to, let me stop pressing buttons, that's equal to, what did you get to the nearest tenth? Negative what? Good, 643.5. Okay, so that means S, remember S is your position or your displacement, which is what we're asked to find. That would be M times T plus B. T is the X in our case, or the X that we're typically thinking of is represented by T because that's our time. That's equal to 65T minus 643.5. That's our equation. That's how far the car was from Jones Beach at time T. What questions do you have? Okay, so that's section 1.3, which is linear functions and models.